What if the next God of War game doesn't star Kratos? What if it doesn't star Atreus either? According to a new insider report, the next project set in the God of War universe could place the spotlight on one of the most important and mysterious characters in the entire Norse saga, Faye. And if the information is accurate, we may not have to wait all that long to see it, with a reported target release window in the first half of 2027. The claim comes from insider Nate the Hate, who stated on X that the next title is indeed set within the God of War universe and that Faye will serve as the lead character. That alone is a massive shift for the franchise. Since the very beginning of the series, starting back in 2005, the identity of God of War has been inseparable from Kratos. Even when the franchise reinvented itself with God of War, shifting from Greek mythology to Norse mythology and adopting a more cinematic, over-the-shoulder presentation, Kratos remained the emotional and mechanical core of the experience. The same was true for God of War Ragnarok, which expanded the narrative scope, deepened the father-son dynamic, and concluded the Norse arc in a way that felt definitive. Moving away from Kratos as the primary playable character would represent one of the boldest creative decisions the studio has ever made. According to the insider, gameplay is said to differ from the Norse God of War games, with more of a focus on action. That wording is especially interesting. The Norse saga leaned heavily into cinematic storytelling, weighty combat, RPG-style progression systems, gear upgrades, skill trees, and layered narrative structure. Combat was deliberate, impactful, and methodical, designed to reinforce Kratos' power and presence. If this new project shifts toward a stronger emphasis on action, that could mean faster pacing, more aggressive combat design, fewer RPG systems, or perhaps a combat style that reflects Faye's own fighting philosophy rather than Kratos' brute strength. Faye was known in the lore as a fierce warrior, one who fought Thor to a standstill and actively resisted the Aesir. Her style could logically be more agile, more fluid, possibly more acrobatic. A gameplay overhaul would not just differentiate the title mechanically, it would reinforce the narrative shift in protagonist. The reported timeline is equally notable. Nate the Hate claims the game is currently planned for reveal later this year, with a release window in the first half of 2027 barring delays. Considering development cycles for modern AAA titles, that timeline feels plausible. Santa Monica Studio has been quiet since the release of Ragnarok in 2022, and while post-launch support and PC releases take time, a 5-year development window for a new project would align with industry standards. If the studio began early conceptual work even before Ragnarok shipped, a 2027 target becomes even more realistic. There is additional context that lends credibility to the rumor. A LinkedIn profile from a senior writer at Santa Monica Studio previously referenced work on a new franchise within the God of War universe. That phrase stands out. Not a brand new IP disconnected from existing lore, but something described as a new franchise within the existing universe. The writer reportedly worked at Sony Interactive Entertainment from August 2020 to September 2025 and contributed to long-term narrative and franchise strategy, including the development of characters, storylines, and original lore that expanded the intellectual property. That kind of language suggests expansion, not repetition. It implies that the studio is looking at God of War not just as a linear sequence of Kratos-led entries, but as a broader mythological sandbox capable of supporting multiple perspectives. Further discussion on Reset Era fueled speculation about genre direction. Some users suggested the project could lean heavily into RPG territory, possibly even becoming something drastically different from prior entries. Leaker Ashong pushed back on the idea that it would be a CRPG, clarifying that it is not that type of experience. When pressed about whether it might still qualify broadly as an RPG, the response was a suggestive emoji rather than a firm denial. That ambiguity leaves room for interpretation. It could mean the game retains progression systems while prioritizing action. It could mean a hybrid structure. It could even indicate a streamlined experience that strips back some of the heavier RPG layering seen in the Norse saga. If the emphasis truly shifts toward action, perhaps the combat loop becomes the primary focus, with narrative and progression systems serving as support rather than co-leads. Another piece of the puzzle comes from comments about Cory Barlog, the director of God of War 2018. In October 2025, it was claimed that he is making an action game. At the time, that statement generated speculation that Barlog might be leading an entirely new IP. However, when viewed alongside these new insider claims, it becomes possible that this action game is actually this Faye-centered project. Barlog has a history of pushing the franchise in unexpected directions. The 2018 reboot fundamentally redefined God of War's tone, structure, and gameplay philosophy. If he is indeed involved in another reinvention, this could represent the next evolution of the series. Even respected journalist Jason Schreier added fuel to the fire. In the same discussion thread, Schreier commented, "I suppose now it's become obvious what I meant by not a new IP, but it might feel like one." That line is extremely telling. A Faye-led God of War game would absolutely feel like something new, while technically remaining within the same continuity. Different protagonists, potentially different combat style, possibly a different time period, and yet still anchored in the mythology and events fans already know. It would allow Santa Monica Studio to take creative risk without abandoning the brand identity that has become synonymous with prestige action gaming. From a narrative perspective, Faye is one of the most compelling untapped characters in the franchise. Known also as Laufey the Just, she was not simply Kratos' wife or Atreus' mother. She was a giant, a warrior, and the architect behind much of the prophecy that drove the Norse saga. Her death set the events of God of War 2018 into motion. Her ashes were the catalyst for the journey. Her foresight shaped the path Kratos and Atreus walked. Yet, despite her enormous influence, players have only seen glimpses of her through flashbacks and murals. A full game centered on Faye would provide an opportunity to explore the giants before their fall, to witness her battle against Thor firsthand, and to understand her motivations in greater depth. It could even explore how she met Kratos and what she saw in him that others did not. There's also the question of tone. Kratos' arc in the Norse saga revolved around restraint, fatherhood, and breaking cycles of violence. A Fae-led story could explore rebellion, resistance, and prophecy from the perspective of someone fighting against inevitable destruction. If the gameplay becomes more action-forward, that tonal shift could align perfectly with a character who was actively waging war against the Aesir. Mechanically and narratively, the pieces fit together in a way that feels intentional rather than arbitrary. Of course, it is critical to emphasize that none of this has been officially confirmed. Sony has not announced a new God of War title, Santa Monica Studio has not revealed a Faye project, insider reports, even when supported by credible voices, remain unofficial until formally unveiled. Plans can change, development can shift, release windows can move. The barring any delay caveat is important, especially in an industry where delays have become increasingly common for large-scale productions. Until we see a trailer, a teaser, or an official press release, everything remains speculation. That said, the convergence of insider claims, LinkedIn references, genre clarifications, comments from Cory Barlog, and Drachen Schreier's cryptic remark creates a compelling narrative. It paints a picture of a studio that is not content to simply repeat the Norse formula. Instead, it suggests a willingness to expand the God of War universe into something broader, perhaps even transforming it into a multi-perspective mythological saga capable of sustaining different leads across different eras. If this rumor proves accurate, the next God of War will not just be another sequel. It will be a statement about the future direction of the franchise. It will test whether audiences are ready to embrace a world without Kratos at the center, at least temporarily. It will test whether the brand is strong enough to support a new primary protagonist. And it will test whether action-focused gameplay can coexist with the emotional storytelling that defined the Norse era. Now, I want to hear from you. Would you play a God of War game starring Faye? Do you want the series to lean more heavily into pure action, or do you prefer the RPG-driven cinematic style of the Norse saga? Do you think 2027 is realistic, or does that feel too soon? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you want to support the channel even further, check out my Patreon, where the latest exclusive is a deep dive into how the Xbox One lost the momentum that the Xbox 360 had built. Thank you for watching, and as always, game on.